Hey guys, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to earn the thesis point for AP Lang question 2. So basically, how do we write a defensible thesis for a rhetorical analysis essay? For an introductory paragraph, think about it like an inverted triangle. There are three parts: the hook, the context, and the thesis. Now, technically speaking, you can actually combine the context and the thesis into the same sentence, but the idea here is to start from the most broad and then narrow down to the most specific. For the context portion of the introductory paragraph, you can actually combine that with the thesis itself. And so the context portion is just when you identify the specific passage that you're talking about. So if it is an essay or an article, you're going to be looking at the title, author, genre, and tone. And then if it's a speech or letter, you're going to be looking for the speaker, occasion, or exigence, and the audience. You would include tone here as well if possible. The final portion of an introductory paragraph is the thesis. Now, I should mention that according to the College Board's rubric, the thesis can happen anywhere in the essay. It does not have to be in the intro or even in the conclusion. However, I find that students who put the thesis in the beginning of their essay tend to write a stronger paper because they have more of a direction. I do, however, recommend restating your thesis in your conclusion, just worded a little bit differently. That way you have it in the beginning and the end, so you can be more likely to earn the thesis point because you are more likely to have said a defensible claim. As you read and annotate the passage, you're going to be looking for either strategies or choices. These are things that the author does in order to develop his or her argument. It could be anything from juxtaposition to an appeal to emotion, perhaps the use of flattery or even criticism. So as you decide what you want to talk about in your essay, these choices or strategies need to be present in your thesis. A defensible thesis also needs to mention author's purpose. So if the choices and strategies are what the author does, then the purpose is why the author does it. Why does he or she use these strategies or make these choices? And why did he or she write this piece to begin with? In order to be defensible, a rhetorical analysis thesis should address strategies and purpose. However, if you want to make it a little bit more complex, you can add another layer, which is to consider the effect on the audience. Now, this is not mandatory, nor is it always appropriate to do so. However, sometimes students want to strengthen their thesis, and this is one way to do that. So think about why the author made the choices that he or she did. That's purpose, but also sometimes we have to realize that speakers tailor their choices to their audience. So what is the effect of these strategies? Is it trying to get the audience to think a certain way, to act a certain way? There should be an effect of these strategies, because if they chose these strategies for a reason, they're trying to elicit a particular response. Let's take a look at an example where we have the context and the thesis in the same sentence. So we're going to lead in with the context. So here we have the author's full name, because the first time that you reference the author, you want to use his or her full name. And then after that, you refer to them by their last name. And then we've got passionate article. So passionate is describing article here. So we have that as our tone. And then lastly, we have the name of the article, America Needs Its Nerds. Now notice that because it's an article, we put it in quotation marks and the punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. This is the actual thesis portion, so this is the part that is defensible. So we need to have strategies and purpose. Notice that we're using the verb form of strategies here, so instead of definition, we have defines, and instead of juxtaposition, we have contrasts. Works just fine. Also, the prompt asked about how the author used certain strategies to develop his argument, so we have that phrase in here to make sure that we're answering the prompt. However, we don't just stop with the word argument or message. We want to actually specify what the argument or message is for clarification purposes. To make your thesis even stronger, you can add on another layer, and that is basically the effect on the reader or the audience. So this can be done by adding a dependent clause to the end of your sentence, or by simply starting a new sentence and just analyzing the effect that way. Now that we understand the different parts of a defensible thesis statement for a rhetorical analysis essay, let's just go over a very quick checklist here. So first of all, you need to identify the strategies or choices and the purpose. You also need to make sure that you're not just restating the prompt. You need to add specifics and, if possible, change the verb. For instance, instead of saying develop his argument, you could say furthers his argument. You want to make sure that you're not just restating the prompt word for word, because that's not defensible. That's the information that's already provided. They want your interpretation of the passage. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're answering the prompt. Now that might seem really obvious, but sometimes students actually forget what they're supposed to be looking for because they're so wrapped up in just finding strategies and purpose that they don't realize they're looking at perhaps an introduction of something or a conclusion of something. And so you need to really think about what you're being asked. And there you have it, guys. Those are my best tips for coming up with a defensible thesis for AP Lang Q2, the rhetorical analysis question. If you are interested in finding out more tips on how to pass the AP Lang exam, please don't forget to click subscribe and also turn your notifications on, because I'm going to be posting more content every week on this channel. Until next time, guys, happy writing!